Greetings, fellow moviegoers, and welcome to Movie Central, the place to talk about movies, TV shows based on movies, toys based on movies, games based on movies, and rides based on movies. I'm your host, Mr. CCS, and this is my pet gorilla, George. Well, here we are again with the DCAMU movies, with the second entry in the franchise and the first chapter in the main story. Flashpoint is more of a prelude to this story overall. But before we talk about this movie, let's get into a history from a certain era from DC that I'm not too keen on before we get into this movie and this franchise. So, Flashpoint is the Nexus event that reinvented the DC Comics continuity back in 2011. And the new continuity consisted of 52 new series of comics called the New 52. And I don't like the New 52 very much. The darker tone doesn't fit many of the characters, especially Superman and the Flash. The stories aren't very memorable, save for a few, and it just wasn't a good look for DC. So it got revamped again in 2016 with the Rebirth era, which was good, but still not amazing. As far as the animated continuity goes, the animated films started with Flashpoint adaptation, which led into a large universe based on the New 52, and ended with yet another Nexus event. But we'll get there when we get there. As far as the quality of these movies go, the fans weren't too keen on them, and the numbers for digital and physical sales were not too good. But for a decade later, after the franchise began, how does it hold up? And how does this first film stand almost 10 years later? It's time to find out. This is Justice League War. A universe of darkness, a world threatened by chaos. When the world is threatened by an invasion of Apocalypse, led by Darkseid, voiced by Steve Blum, it's up to 7 heroes to defend the world and make it a safe place once again. The 7 heroes united are Cyborg, voiced by Shamar Moore, cybernetic being composed of apocalyptic tech; Shazam, voiced by Sean Astin, a titan of magic; Green Lantern, voiced by Justin Kirk, galactic law enforcement officer; The Flash, voiced by Christopher Gorham, the fastest man alive; Wonder Woman, voiced by Michelle Monaghan, Amazon Princess of Themyscira; the Dark Knight detective Batman, voiced by Jason O'Mara; and the Man of Steel, Superman, voiced by Alan Tudyk. United, they are a force to be reckoned with, a Justice League. So, now as I said, I am not a huge fan of the New 52. Specifically, the Justice League is very dreary and dark. Only Batman is the dreary and dark character. All the others are more balanced. However, these movies and this comic that this first movie, the New 52, is adapted from are the only real visions of this darker vision of DC that I am a fan of. It's not my favorite thing ever, mind you, but I'm open to the specific tone being used for a DC cinematic universe. But it's not what I would do if I were in charge. But I am willing to live with it here. So, with that segue, let's see what the movie has to offer. The characters, for the most part, are pretty good. Superman has his charm and look, but not any of his human personality, so that sucks. Wonder Woman has that sense of a warrior that is in the wrong time period, which is good. The Flash is the socially awkward outcast turned cool guy of the group. Again, more like Wally, but also fits Barry sometimes. Green Lantern is the impulsive one, which is a good arc for him. Cyborg is the one who struggles with his identity. Batman is just Batman. Nothing else I can say there. And Shazam is a kid in a superhero's body. These are all good to great versions of these characters. However, I do not like the villain in this movie, Darkseid. I always imagined Darkseid being on scale to Thanos from the MCU. Not as a giant, but that's a minor nitpick. He also barely speaks and mostly just makes growls and grunts, and his head is in an awkward shape. Also, Darkseid shouldn't be the first villain to leak faces. Stara the Conqueror, Brainiac, and others work for that first threat. Apocalypse and Darkseid should be built up, to. Not the first one, because if he's the first villain they beat, who's going to top him? I mean, you could argue the Anti-Monitor works, but no. I'm not going with that. This is not what I want in an adaptation of Darkseid, so he's very disappointing as a villain in my eyes. And finally, we have the design of the parademons, which are kinda stupid. I don't think this is how they're supposed to look. They don't have to look too grotesque, but they shouldn't look stupid either. They look so lame, and I didn't like that at all. That's all I really have to say about the film's characters. With the minor problems they face, however, the animation is still strong. And it looks like a moving comic book, which is what I loved about Flashpoint. So the animation style is consistent, and that's one of the best things about it. All the characters look great, and that they fit in their own environment. I specifically like the New 52 costumes being adapted but changed in certain ways. Wonder Woman having blue accents, Batman looking 3D-esque, the Flash not really changing that much, Green Lantern's details on his suit, and Superman having the classic S emblem. Honestly, it's all I ever really wanted with these characters to be adapted. Anyways, moving on. And now we have the action, which has kind of gone down in my estimation since Flashpoint was such a violent movie. As a matter of fact, I feel it's like a little pulled back. I think the reason for this was because Flashpoint was super grotesque, and I feel like parents complained a little bit, so they toned it down just a tiny bit. There were only two moments that were pushing the PG-13 rating. The moment where Superman snaps to Saw's neck and goes on a rampage, almost kills the Dark Knights, and when Superman blasts laser eyes into Darkseid's sockets. It's visually impressive. As for individual action scenes, the best action scene to me is Batman versus Superman versus the Green Lantern scene, as it's incredibly fast-paced and fun, but the comic did it better, and there are other sequences that are also cool too, and very fun from beginning to end. Now, this movie is not as good as Flashpoint was, but it's a pretty good movie, and the Justice League movie I'd choose over the 2017 film if I had to pick one of them to watch, although Zack Snyder's Justice League easily blows both of those two out of the water, and especially the Justice League animated series episode Secret Origins. This movie, to me, as of now, gets a 9 out of 10. Well, that's it for this review. I know they've been a little shorter recently, but I'm a little busy right now, so I can't really get the fastest and longest things out. So feel free to leave your thoughts on this movie below in the comments, and tune in next week for the next chapter of the DC animated movie universe with Son of Batman. With that said, my name is Mr. CCS, and this is Movie Central, and that, my friends, is a wrap. See you next week.